Welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and get started and jump right into everything. Okay, I always like to start with a look, especially when we're talking about W-9s and 1099s, a look at just kind of that basic framework that guides you in what you do in terms of getting that data right and validating that data so you can get your filings done as efficiently as possible. And so there's a number of sections of the law that come very specifically into play related to today's topics. And in that regard, you see toward the top of the slide a few code sections there. I mean, you see I'm running down the bullet points, but the most important in terms of today's topics are the top three: 6041, 6109, 3406. These are the sections of the law that state you're required to get the name and the TIN of the payee, and that they need to provide that to you. And if they don't, then you enter into backup withholding. And of course, within these code sections, there's of course subparagraphs and then subparagraphs to the subparagraphs. And there's related code sections we don't see here that help prescribe the rules for how that TIN and name should match up. And then different payees also, different requirements for them. So for example, 6041 that you see here would apply toward the majority of your payees. But for example, code section 6045, which isn't listed on this slide, I know, was carved out specifically for dealing with payments involving attorneys. So you'll see that kind of thing as well. Now, and when I say code sections, this literally means the law, okay? Nonetheless, the code sections are really tricky to follow. The language is very legalistic. And so my recommendation is you have them in your back pocket because you're going to need to quote them if you come under audit or you're facing a proposed penalty. So for example, right now, proposed penalty notice season's wrapping up. Hopefully you guys got your abatement and waiver request letters out, didn't just pay the penalties. And this idea of knowing what the law is a central component of your due diligence requirements. Okay, so the expectation is you know the law, and in those cases you have to prove it. And then from there, that means you're able to apply the law to your individual facts and circumstances, which is really important in terms of what we're doing. So keeping all of that in mind, then let's start looking at, we're going to look at a couple of things today. We're going to look at the law as it stands and the law as it's changing. Because of course it's always changing. Year after year it changes. That's why you sign up and sit through webinars like this, because, and not just year after year, but even from month to month, we see changes in the rules when it comes to collecting data, validating it, and reporting on 1099s or W-2s for that matter, or 1095s or 1098s or 1042s and 1042Ss, and information reporting in general. It's an area that's constantly in flux. Now, in speaking of those other information returns, just as a heads up, hopefully everyone's on the same page. If you do have any 1042, 1042S reporting to do early next year, please know that in June and July, the IRS did update all the forms W-8, the BEN, the BENE, the IMY, the ECI, and the EXP. And of course, that's what those are the forms you use. Those W-8s are very similar to the W-9. In essence, they're the documents you use to get the data from your payees who are non-resident aliens and to whom you've paid U.S. sourced income during the year. And of course, all of that could then end up being reportable on the forms 1042, 1042S. And the expectation is that within the next month or two, you are using those brand new forms. Typically, we have 6 months after the form is released, you have to start using it. And so with the June and July release of the new forms, that puts us, of course, here we are into, well, December and then January. But you really don't, to be fair, you do not want to incorporate new forms into your policies and procedures in the middle of filing season. So I highly recommend you start using the new forms sooner rather than later. Otherwise, you're kind of asking for trouble there. And one of the reasons you're also asking for trouble is because enforcement is way, way up. with the IRS. And you may have heard on the individual level whether the chances of being audited are low, and that is very much true. But when it comes to, of course, the companies and organizations you work for, those organizations are getting audited more heavily than ever. The enforcement budget's bigger than ever at the IRS. It's up to 50% of the total budget.